education started when I was in the 5th grade. My teacher divided up the boys and the girls, and sent the girls to one room, the boys to another, and proceeded to show us the exact same video. In this video, a boy talks to his grandfather about erections, and a girl talks to her mother about her period. Now, it seems innocent enough, but by dividing our class up by gender like that, my teacher was implying that sex was something we shouldn't talk to each other about. She was also implying that when it came to sex, boys and girls have inherently different roles to play. The video went on to show that for girls, sex exists for reproduction. For boys, sex exists for pleasure. Now, I'm not in 5th grade anymore, and I'm here at Ohio State studying public health. And it was pretty clear as soon as I got to campus that I had missed a lot in terms of sex ed. So much so that I ended up starting a club called Student Advocates for Sexual Health Awareness, whose sole goal is to bring realistic sex ed to campus. Now, I found that through this experience, my education was not unique. There are a lot of kids that come to campus knowing next to nothing about their bodies. And this is probably due to Ohio's sex education laws, or lack thereof. This is the policy. It's exactly two things. One, that sex education should happen, and two, that it needs to cover HIV, STIs, and abstinence. Nowhere in the law does it say anything about being unbiased, or secular, or even medically accurate. Medically accurate, let's talk about that. When you had sex ed, do you remember having to memorize organs? Maybe you filled in a little diagram or something? For me, all the organs were internal. I learned fallopian tube, and uterus, and vas deferens, but we didn't talk about any external organs. We certainly didn't talk about any external organs that are meant for pleasure. In fact, when we talked about bodily sensations at all, it was always in the context of pain. Pain when you have a baby, pain when you have sex, and pain when you have your period. It was always made to seem very normal to me. Of course, I'm a woman, someday I'll have a baby, so I have a period, so I have painful periods. That's how it works. The problem with this rhetoric is that it makes it very easy for us to push aside women's health complaints. Take my friend, for example. She has notoriously bad periods, but she handles it really well. One day, last year, however, she passed out in her college dining hall from her cramps. Now, an ambulance came, took her to the hospital, where myself and another friend met her. The emergency room doctor came in, and the first thing he asked was what she had been drinking. He proceeded to ask about medical history and her current pain level, that kind of thing, but never once did he actually touch her. There was no abdomen palpation, no call to an OBGYN for an exam, nothing. He pretty much told her to take some extra ibuprofen and get on with her day. Now, in the doctor's defense, he's probably been taught since 5th grade, or even younger, that that kind of pain is okay, it's normal. He probably only talked about pain when he was in school, never talked about pleasure. So, when he got to med school and then became a doctor, he wouldn't have been comfortable talking about it anyway. And this isn't uncommon for doctors. A recent study found that only about 14% of OBGYNs regularly ask their patients about sexual satisfaction, which is problematic because it has been proven that sexual satisfaction is a huge component of overall life satisfaction. And if your OBGYN isn't going to ask you about it, then who is? The fact that we have OBGYNs at all is a little bit sexist. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that the human reproductive system is beautiful and complex and absolutely warrants its own medical specialization. But why isn't there an equivalent for men? Sure, they go see urologists, but it's often when they're having a performance problem. Besides, urologists cover a whole slew of things that gynecologists don't have to deal with, like the kidneys, the urinary system, that kind of thing. As a society, we place a huge emphasis on female reproductive health over male reproductive health, in the same way that we emphasize male pleasure over female pleasure. You might not agree with that statement right away, but I want to show you this number. $84 million. That is what the government spends on erectile dysfunction medication in 1 year. Yeah. Now, it's not my place to tell you what I think about government spending, so I'll just say this. Viagra, which is the most common erectile dysfunction medication, was approved by the FDA in 1998. Addie, which is the female Viagra, if you will, wasn't approved until 2015. Maybe if society hadn't been so focused on male pleasure, women wouldn't have had to wait 17 years for an equivalent medication. Now, I haven't even brought up another group that has a huge stake in this conversation, the transgender community. You might remember Trump's military ban on transgender people a little bit back, but you might not remember his reasoning for it. Trump stated that the, quote, tremendous medical costs would just be too much for the military to handle. Now, we didn't really have any numbers on that, so the Rand Corporation did a study, and their estimate was that it would cost between $2.4 and $8.4 million a year for the military to cover all transgender healthcare-related costs. Trump thinks that $8.4 million is tremendous. I wonder what he thinks about the $84 million we spend on his erectile dysfunction medication. The healthcare system is sexist, but it's not its fault. What else would we expect of a system that's made up of the products of a sexist society? Imagine just for a second. What if we had all had gender equitable sex ed, even before the 5th grade? The future doctors in the room would have learned that sure, women can have painful periods, but if the pain is extreme, it's often due to an underlying medical condition that can and should be treated. They also would have learned about bodily sensations other than pain, and then they'd be comfortable asking their patients about sexual satisfaction when they became doctors. Maybe one of the future chemists in the room would have been inspired to create Addie a lot sooner. I know it's idealistic, but consider it. We are the products of our environment. If changing the way that we teach sex education in the United States could make our healthcare system even a little bit more gender equitable, imagine what could happen if we stopped teaching our children gender norms at all.